Hey guys, Extreme Strategy here, and today we're back inside the lands of Middle-earth using the Dawnless Days mod, and what we have here is a 3v2 siege with the Easterlings, Isenguard, and the Haradrim, attacking the combined might of the Elves and the forces of Gondor. And this is a very interesting battle, with the defenders using an interesting formation where they actually have the Elven spears interlocked with Gondorian shields. A very interesting strategy indeed, and this is done multiple times throughout various locations in the battle. And then you have the other aspect that the capture point is right here, and in order to win, defenders have to stay inside of the settlement where they have the choke points that they can use. Because once the enemy gets through, all the Mamelukes and Cav will become very lethal indeed. Without further ado, let's get this fight started. So immediately the hordes of the Easterlings begin running towards the city, sprinting as fast as they can, but already a trebuchet is beginning to open fire at them, and the boulder's going to come flying on down, and it's going to absolutely miss, because artillery in this game is the most inaccurate thing on the face of the earth. Also, a huge thank you to the players that were inside of this game, all from the Dawnless Days Discord server, so there'll be a link to that in the description below. On the right flank, there is an absolute ton of Mamelukes and Cav moving around to potentially try and break in through one of the gaps over here. However, the forces of Gondor and the Elves have a bit of a surprise for the forces of darkness, with the Lithian Rangers and Lords of Lagilin all hidden away inside of this grass, and even an artillery piece right behind the trees. And here is the first push made by the Easterlings as their men come charging on in, looking for some Elves or men of Gondor to fight. And there are none immediately in this first little section, but the artillery does open fire and does light some grass up behind them, and even takes out a couple of Easterling warriors. But the artillery from the forces of darkness will not go unheard either, opening fire on some units, and the Gondorian swordsmen are actually going to pull back as a tree burns right next to them. And the first engagement has just begun, with Lagilin spears fighting warlords of Rune, and some Lagilin blades are in there as well, and arrows are going to come arcing out over to strike the warlords of Rune. And more artillery from the forces of Mordor open fire, and they are going to just shoot the middle of nowhere. Yep, that sounds about right for artillery. And now the archer volleys are beginning to go off as the archers pull back their bows and release their arrows, but arrows are coming in at them as well. And it is just going to form a massive crossfire of arrows and fireballs hitting the ground as the units just try and kill as many of the enemy as they can. And the artillery right here is actually being really accurate, doing a lot of damage and burning up a bunch of the warriors of Rune. And more fighting is beginning to break out across the streets as the Lagilin spears and blades hold off other groups of the Lokara macemen. And at this point, there's just a hail of fire arrows coming down on both sides, as both of them just release volley after volley into the archers the other side. And it is just absolute madness at this point. And now some baby Mamelukes are going to come charging on forwards, releasing what looks to be little projectiles into the Gondor sword infantry, and then they're going to come forwards, and they're not going to do a whole lot of damage. As a matter of fact, they're actually just going to get pelted by a ton of arrows as the Lords of Lagilin pull back their bows and open fire, with some Gondor archers firing as well. And the baby Mamelukes are going to pull back, with arrows being shot into their backs. One of them even has a fire burning right on his butt. Several of them do, in fact. That looks painful. That looks very painful indeed. And the fighting is just getting fiercer and fiercer in the streets as burning arrows keep falling into the warriors of Gondor and the Elves, lighting them up. And the artillery is still being fierce indeed, releasing fireball after fireball. And still back here, the forces of Isengard have barely sent out any of their troops. They still have White Hand Grenadiers, Pikes, and Uruk-hai infantry, just staying back in reserve and waiting for when the time is right for them to strike. And a volley of fire arrows are being launched into these Gondor sword infantry right into their face. That has got to hurt. And they're just getting shot point blank by a bunch of these Black Serpent Rangers. And currently they are doing absolutely nothing but just blocking with their shields, which seem to be doing just fine. And now the archers of Gondor are going to answer with some fire arrows of their own. However, will not be nearly as effective, as there are far more archers here for the forces of darkness than there are the forces of Gondor. And some fireballs come in directly into some of the Lagilin blades. That was actually a pretty good hit, burning a bunch of men pretty badly. And more fireballs come in, blasting a hole right in this group of Lagilin archers and spears that are fighting alongside some of the Fountain Guards, trying to get rid of some warlords of Rune. A very powerful unit indeed. And some locations, it is just a standoff between some pikemen and some spearmen and pikemen, as neither side wants to put their pikemen in a position that they can't handle. However, the Lokram halberdiers are getting the worst end of the deal, as fire arrows and normal arrows are just pelting them left and right. And the artillery is still trying to light up this entire group of soldiers soldiers, and some fire arrows are going to come in, striking both the Mamluks and the Lagellan blades and Gondor swordsmen. In the back, the trebuchet is doing some pretty heavy damage to the White Hand Stormers, as currently they're just sitting back here, putting their shields over their heads, with the Uruk-hai crossbows in front of them, and they are getting pelted by the trebuchets that Gondor has sitting back and back. And now some Adaconori, yes, I said that correctly, totally, are fighting some Lagellan blades and some Gondor sword infantry, as well as some units that are from an Elven Onager team. And the Camel Riders have come charging on in to try and inflict some damage as well. However, they'll soon pull back, as they don't want to take any casualties. And look at this fiery blob right here, where just fire arrows from both sides have been pelting this area, and now it just is glowing with fire. And more fireballs are coming on in, trying to hit some Gondor sword infantry, but missing horribly. And even though the balance of power is in favor of the attacking forces, the men of Gondor and the elves are going to make them pay for every inch that they take. Fountain guards are moving on over, trying to get themselves in position. More fire arrows are just continuing to pelt the units over here, and these guys who are trying to be protected by a building are failing horribly, as fire arrows are finding them anyway. And a camel rear charge into the backs of some men of Gondor can do some damage. However, the Elven King's riders are going to pin down the camel riders so that way they cannot escape. And the Adakori, who are a general unit, are currently fighting some Gondor sword infantry. The only problem is that the general is now far away from the rest of his army, and Isengard is still holding back all of their troops. Not a single soldier of Isengard has yet stepped foot into the fray, although they have taken some casualties from the trebuchets to the White Hand Stormers. A very good target for the trebuchets indeed, and some baby Mamluks are beginning to push forwards, hoping to break this blob right here, as a lot of the warriors of the forces of darkness are dead to fire arrows, and there seems to be plenty of elves holding the line. And now the baby Mamluks are actually just going to retreat, taking lots of fire from the enemy. And over on the side, it is an absolute mess, with Serpent Guard fighting Citadel Guards. The Elven King's riders just disappeared into the forest to try and get away. We also have some Adakori who are continuing to fight as well, and it is just beginning to fall apart for the forces of darkness on this flank. And the Adakori general is beginning to get stuck between a rock and a hard place, with Gondor swordmen and Citadel Guards fighting them. And more fireballs come on in, one of them even hitting some Fountain Guards. That was an excellent shot from some artillery. Serpent Guard are now trying to protect the Adakori. However, the Citadel Guard will be able to wipe the Serpent Guards out very quickly, as they are spearmen versus cav. And now the Elven King's riders are going to join into the fray as well, making it an even worse situation to be in. And the Knights of the Silver Swan are going to start to run forwards, and then they're going to turn around and pull back. And a fireball comes on in right into the center of some high elven units, lighting them on fire, doing a ton of damage. And the fire arrows are going to be coming down and lighting up yet another group of elven units. These elves are getting absolutely lit up, quite literally. And at this point, one of the generals has fallen, or the Adakori general has died at this point, and now it's just his bodyguard left over here. And the fireballs come on in yet again, blasting a hole right in this area, lighting up a bunch of units. And now the Umbari Usurpers are going to come charging on in as well to engage them inside of combat. As more fireballs come on in, another one hitting. Hey, the artillery has finally woken up, and then the next shot just hits a building. Fire arrows continue to pelt both sides everywhere in the battlefield, and there seems to even be some fighting inside of these trees, where some Serpent Guard managed to break through and are now fighting Gondor archers, Elven King's riders, and Citadel Guards. And Serpent Guard have continued to break through as well, and they're now being chased by the Elven King's riders. All the while, artillery continues to blast this blob of troops over and over again, as fire arrows and fireballs just rack up tons of kills. And then a very interesting play by the Gondor player, as the Knights of the Silver Swan attack some Bane of the Steppes. The only problem is that the Knights of the Silver Swan are going to be shot in the back by a bunch of Serpent Archers, meaning that they are now going to be caught out in the open, fighting the enemy by themselves, with no support anywhere in sight. And the Grenadiers of Isengard are moving in, the heavy NAFT throwers, and they are going to pull out their explosive pouches, hurl them forwards, and this entire group of units can just say goodbye to their lives, as just grenade after grenade gets tossed into their mix, lighting them up. They are pulling back. They are going to flee, because they know that those Grenadiers are the ultimate blob buster inside of this game. And now the infantry are going to clash, now that that blob has been broken open, and the Uruk-hai infantry can come pouring in, as Isengard finally begins to send in its men. The only problem for the forces of Gondor and the Elves is that Isengard has yet more infantry that they haven't even sent on in yet. The Knights of the Silver Swan are continuing to fight and losing battle. However, some Citadel guards are coming on in to try and help out, as the few units that are still holding back this massive blob of units are now beginning to turn and run. And the fighting in the central pathway is becoming absolutely insane, as the men of Gondor and the Elves are fighting shoulder by shoulder to hold off the Uruk-hai. And I believe that is only the Uruk-hai who are doing the fighting over here, as at this point, all that are left are Easterlings and Isengard, because the men of Haradrim have basically all been wiped out at this point. And some Elven King's Riders are going to get engaged with some Lochrim Macemen, and they're going to have to run and let the Citadel Guard cover them. And at this point, the Knights of the Silver Swan have lost their leader, meaning that Gondor is now generalless, which is going to be a massive blow to their morale. And the only general left now is going to be the Elven general, who is charging into the exact same area as the last general died. Although they're going to be able to kill a lot of units, they're going to also take a ton of casualties. However, the general, he's still alive, so that's good for the elves. However, a lot of men at this point are turning and running, and some grenades are beginning to go off on occasion over here, blowing up some units. At this point, most of Gondor's troops have fled. That's primarily up to the elves to do the majority of the fighting. But there are still some warriors of Gondor that are left in the game. And the Elven King's Riders are going to come charging on in with some Uruk-hai crossbowmen, where they will begin to engage in combat. However, the general will go down and the group will begin to waver, and then they will break. And this will cause a chain rout across the entirety of the map as all the units of the forces of Gondor and the elves rout. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe. Go check out the Discord server and the Spot. Links to both those in the description below. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.